Welcome into Locked On Phillies. Today, we have a great crossover episode. The Phillies are heading up to New York for their second series of the season with the Mets, and me and the host of Locked On Mets, Ryan Finkelstein, get into it and preview the series with some great pitching matchups. All of that next on today's Locked On Phillies.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The New York Mets and the Philadelphia Phillies will play a series at Citi Field this weekend. I will be in attendance Friday night, really looking forward to it. And I'm also looking forward to today's show where I get to be a cocky Mets fan with the host of Locked On Phillies on board. To preview this series, we got Connor Thomas with us. This will be today's edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We have our second Locked On crossover of the week. Earlier on this week, I was able to talk to Lucas of Locked On Cardinals right after the Mets just had that incredible comeback victory. Today, I get to talk to the host of Locked On Phillies, Connor Thomas. For the Phillies listeners who don't know, I am Ryan Finkelstein, the host of Locked On Mets. You can follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. Find some of my writing about the Mets at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Connor, first of all, how's the season been going for you? Phillies got off to a little bit of a rough start, but the bats seem to be heating up a little bit right now.
Yeah, it was an interesting start. The weird thing is that opening series against the Athletics, and we know what the Athletics are going to be. Not exactly the cream of the crop out west or anywhere in the MLB, but the Phillies look good comparatively. So everyone got really high, and you already had that whole strong offseason with all the money spent, and then you lose the next four series. So there have been people like not hitting the panic button, but some fans are questioning Joe Girardi's ability to manage, questioning the money spent on this team. So it's tense right now in Philadelphia, but that's how it always is to start the year. And then everyone settles in by the time you get deeper into the summer and get more used to the flow of the baseball season. So, hey, good couple of games recently, and hopefully we're hitting the hot streak so that the fans can calm down a little bit compared to what they were when we were losing the series to you guys, the Rockies out in Colorado, the Brewers, stuff like that.
Yeah, it's time for overreaction right now, early in the season. Small sample sizes are king, which is why I get to, at least for now, be the cocky Mets fan on the podcast. And so I just want to ask really most of the other Locked On hosts when I cross over with them. I think my leading question is going to start to be, how good are the New York Mets?
Well, as of right now, the Mets are 5 games better than the Philadelphia Phillies. And that's about as concrete as you can get. No, they're a nice team. We kind of knew this coming in. We talked when we did the whole NL East roundtable going into the season that the Mets were probably the favorite in mine and yours opinion to win this division, despite the Braves being the defending World Series champion. And even without Jacob deGrom, the Mets are they're rolling right now. It is early. It's still early. So there's plenty of time, as well as I do. And we're really worried about August and September. But right now, they look as good as just about any team in the NL and any team in baseball, really.
It's been an amazing start. You look at the standings right now after the Mets lost this game to 14-6. That's still a 700 winning percentage through 20 games. So 20 games, we knock a small sample size. 20 games is a pretty good representative sample of what a baseball team can be. I mean, that's multiple weeks of stringing together solid performances. They've won each of their first 6 series for the first time in franchise history. You look at the other teams in this division, the Marlins have been hanging in there with their pitching. They're 500 as we record this. We're recording this on Wednesday because I'll be traveling all day on Thursday. So Connor, nice enough to accommodate my schedule to do this series preview a little bit early. If we had recorded this tomorrow night, maybe the Phillies win the next 2 against the Rockies, and they're sitting at 500 as well, and maybe a little bit closer to the Mets in this division. But right now it's Marlins at 8-8 in second. And then you have the Phillies and the Braves both at 8-10 as we record here. The run differentials tell a big story this season so far too. Mets plus 33, I believe, after this latest game. Marlins plus 4, Phillies plus 2, Braves minus 2, and the Nationals, who we can forget about, at minus 41. What have you seen so far from the other teams in this division? The Braves, the Marlins, the Phillies. Like where do you see those teams stacking up in correlation to the Mets right now?
Yeah, well, the Nationals, we know we can just
Yeah.
let them go. The Braves actually in fourth is interesting, and that's something I kind of felt because you lose Freddie Freeman, who even though you replace him with Matt Olson, a more than serviceable replacement there at first, the locker room dynamic has changed significantly, and they still don't have Ronald Acuna back from that significant knee injury he suffered last year. So that team's going to get better, but they're just off to a slow start. I think they're going to finish at least in the top 3, if not top 2, depending on what the Phillies have done. And the Marlins, you're right, their pitching has been strong, but you know what? You got to remember, the Marlins got an opening, like an early series against us, and we always lose down there, so you can't really count those games.
I had to interrupt you. I was at the home opener for the Marlins. I was at that game, so I saw Kyle Gibson. I saw the Marlins just find a way, and Alcantara was awesome for the Marlins in that start. But yeah, the Phillies did not. They just. It was one of those things where when you're a team that's so predicated on offense, the bats can start cold to start off a year. And I think for the Phillies, that was really the case in those early series.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people were worried about Kyle Schwarber, who started really cold. He always starts cold. And you get these new players and you expect them to hit right away. But ultimately, as it shakes out, I haven't seen anything from any of the teams in the division that break me away from how I was originally thinking about the hierarchy of this division. It's really Mets, Braves, Phillies, a little bit of a gap, Marlins, a much bigger gap, and the Nationals. And I think the Marlins have just got out to a very hot start because their pitching has been so good. And listen, I like what they've done offensively as well. Jazz Chisholm he's like a doubles and triples machine. And that team goes as he and some of the young pitchers go. They could be dangerous in a couple of years, but I think the youth that they still have to deal with on this team, as the season goes, the Marlins will fade back to fourth, but certainly an encouraging start for them. There's just such a gap between the quality of wins, though, that the other teams in the division have, even the Marlins, who are sitting in second right now, when compared to the Mets.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the Giants right now as we're recording this, they're 12-5. 3 of those losses have come at the hands of the Mets, and that's just showing you them beating a good team. They take 2 or 3 from the Cardinals. Obviously, today they lost, but that game was one where the Cardinals grinded it out. They're a really good team as well, and they're going to lose some games to good teams. But I think as you look at this division right now, because of the starting pitching the Mets are getting, it's catapulted them into a tier that's above everyone else. Now, a team like the Braves can certainly, all come together with Acuna and they have the World Series pedigree. And a team like the Phillies or the Marlins could be one of those darlings throughout a year that can get really hot and maybe make a run at it. But I think as we sit here and we're about to see these teams, meet up for the second time, it's clear who the class of the division is, and the class of the division is the New York Mets. But I will ask you, I want to talk a lot of Phillies. I want to get under the hood a bit and talk about what's going on with that team. Before we get to that, though, if you're celebrating the special woman in your life, on BlueNile.com, you can easily navigate thousands of fine jewelry options at every price point. Whether she prefers a statement piece or everyday subtle elegance, BlueNile.com has fine jewelry options for every mom. So shop high-quality classic diamond earrings, elegant tennis bracelets, or gemstone pendant necklaces. This Mother's Day, give mom something she'll treasure forever with fine jewelry from BlueNile.com. And Locked On Mets and Locked On Phillies listeners get $50 off $500. This podcast exclusive is only good through Mother's Day, so use the code Locked On. Again, that's code Locked On. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in a discreet package that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever pieces by going to BlueNile.com today. All right, so when we talk about the Phillies, the first thing that always comes to mind for me is how does this team look defensively? And with what's going on with Bryce Harper, now it appears like he is the DH. How long is that situation going to take for his arm to get better? Is this a situation where he might just be a DH this year? I really haven't gotten a clear sense of what that injury is.
Yeah, so he's got elbow soreness in his throwing arm. It's why he's ended up just being a DH over the past couple games. And actually, a recent article came out on NBC Sports Philadelphia, our local NBC channel here that does the TV coverage and carries all of the games. And he did not sound like he was all that excited about the prospect of getting back out there into right field. It sounds like originally this was going to be about a week plus that he was going to spend at the DH spot. Now it sounds like this could continue pretty deep into what's this next month, May? I'm not great with the months. Yeah, so it could be the next couple of weeks that we see Bryce Harper firmly entrenched in the DH spot. Now, the upside is he's not that much of a plus defensively over your average right fielder. Now, Nick Castellanos, who's been playing right field for them in Bryce Harper's absence, is a worse fielder. But Bryce isn't exactly a Gold Glove winner himself. So it's a downgrade, but not one that should be catastrophic there. And he's swinging the bat all right. So I'm not too worried about it. And the defense was never going to be the calling card of this team. So when he gets back, he gets back. For now, we'll sit him in the DH spot. I'm more worried about Kyle Schwarber in left, who's one of the worst defensive metric fielders in all of baseball, who now can't spend his days in the DH spot. That's more my issue.
Yeah, I think for me, it's weird because both Castellanos and Schwarber are just, if you look at the metrics, have been terrible defensively.
Yeah.
Yet at times, I feel like Castellanos is just a little bit more athletic. Maybe can make an extra play. Maybe has a little bit of a better arm. Where Schwarber, it has always looked like a catcher playing the outfield. And he wasn't necessarily a great catcher either. And I think that's the biggest question for me with Harper at DH. Like you said, it's not like Harper is going to win a Gold Glove, but he's an outfielder, and these guys are kind of converted outfielders. So I feel like the degree of difference there is pretty big, and it also doesn't allow you to be as flexible with that DH spot when you also have Alec Bohm and others that could get some of those at bats. So what does it look like with the Schwarber out there with Castellanos? How are they trying to mix all these guys into the lineup if Harper is going to have to be an everyday DH for the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, well, it's clear that they want Castellanos in right because he is a slightly better fielder. Kyle Schwarber's not going to play any position other than left field. You're absolutely right. He looks like a converted catcher. The funny thing is, if I remember right, Bryce Harper originally coming out was a catcher, and they converted him to outfield.
Yeah.
So now he's gotten better, and he's obviously the more athletic body than Schwarber, but it goes back to that same thing where I don't think they're losing all that much. I think the whole MVP aura around him makes you feel like he's a better fielder than he actually is sometimes. That happens with us as well. But ultimately, none of the corner outfield spots are plus defensively here. And the lineup's been pretty solid as of late. The first couple series, Joe Girardi was changing a lot of stuff. Now with Harper having to DH, the infield has actually settled in a little bit with Alec Bohm being the everyday third baseman, Bryson Stott getting sent down. Johan Camargo has settled in at shortstop, and Didi Gregorius has moved to more of a bench role and coming in on certain days. And then the corner outfield is just going to be Schwarber in left, Castellanos in right until Harper's better, because frankly, they don't have any other options out there.
Yeah, and you actually covered my infield question right there with Stott going down, Camargo getting more regular playing time. I was curious how that was shaking out because I know from the at-bats I've seen, Camargo looks like one of their better players, and also he's a pretty good glove too. Do you think Camargo really has grabbed that job from Didi?
Yeah, I do, because of how hot his bat's been. Now, he could easily give it back. And Didi wasn't bad defensively when he was out there. Last year, I think some of his defensive issues stemmed from an elbow problem he had all year long, and it also hurt him at the plate. But this year, his bat just went cold. Camargo got a couple spot starts and was hitting like 500, and you can't take that bat out of the lineup. And he's a plus defensively. So to have him next to Alec Bohm and kind of cover a little bit, even though it's Bohm's glove side, cover a little bit towards that side of the field and help him out, definitely helps out the Phillies infield defense a little bit. So those two have become must plays until they stop hitting consistently. They're going to be in the lineup just about every day.
And Bohm has become kind of a folk hero. How did you take all of that? Obviously that came against the Mets. He made, I mean, it felt like there was like 6 plays in those first 3 innings. It was like the Mets' entire offensive strategy that game was just play Pepper over to third base and just test him and see if he would airmail some throws, and he did. And the cameras, obviously, if you don't know, caught him saying, "I effing hate this place." And then after the game, though, to Bohm's credit, you could not have handled that situation as a professional better than Alec Bohm did answering those questions. And it seems like the fans have really responded to him after that.
They have. It's crazy to get a standing ovation in Philadelphia after saying something like that. By the way, I can't believe in that game that the Mets were just bunting everything down the third baseline until he figured out how to field the ball. But it is crazy how that's kind of grown. In Philadelphia, there's this culture of respect that really carries weight. It's like the old neighborhood, like respect your elders, and the elders in this case are the fans, because we've been around largely longer than players that are in the city. Players come and go, but you're going to be a Philadelphia Phillies fan for life. So when you have a chance to apologize for disrespecting the fan base, which is basically what he did, and then going back on it saying, hey, I don't actually hate this place. It was just a spur of the moment thing. One, we've got short fuses in Philadelphia. You know that following the Mets. It's the same thing in New York. And you can respect an outburst of passion and anger. And when you own up to it, it endears yourself to this fan base. It's the same thing as how Chase Utley was kind of never the most, and sorry to bring up Utley, I know how you guys feel, but Chase Utley wasn't the most lovable guy even to this fan base with the personality, the kind of cold personality that he had. But we respected that because it sort of reminded us of the culture of the city. That's kind of what it is with Alec Bohm. Tell us how you feel, apologize if it was hasty, and then bounce back. And you know what helps is when you start fielding very well and you continue to hit incredibly well. So he's turned into a solid fielder since that, and he's been hitting the cover off the ball. That definitely helps with your standing too.
Yeah, sometimes it takes one moment like that to really be a turning point in a young player's career, and that maybe it's suddenly something by the end of the season we wonder why there was ever a question about whether Bowman would be the Phillies' everyday third baseman, and he might just grab that job and completely run with it as he has early on in this season. I was going to ask you about center field. I was maybe going to talk about Zack Wheeler, Ranger Suarez, but instead you bring up Chase Utley's name. And, there's not a player, I think, in my lifetime and probably any other sport or anything else that I've hated more than Chase Utley. I mean, come on. Especially, and the craziest thing is the defining moment happened in a Dodgers uniform. Not
Yeah.
even, it was like, first of all, in that series, Utley was at the stage of his career where you're almost like, why is Utley even involved in this series at all? It was only almost as just that relic of a rivalry that just kind of heightened the entire series, just having him on the field, and then he takes out to hot his leg, and even his comments after the game. My question to you though is, what Met has there been that you have hated in that way? Has there ever been a Met that has got under your skin the way that Chase Utley has got under the skin of Mets fans?
When you ask that, it's funny. There really isn't a singular one I'd point to. The first name that comes to mind is David Wright, because he was the face of the Mets for such a long time. But the other guys that I hear, it's kind of a funny story. Carlos Beltran is a guy that a lot of guys bring up that he bothered them for some reason. Beltran was a guy that when I played, I started as a center fielder in high school, and that's a guy that my coaches would compare me to. So for some reason, I always had a little bit of a soft spot for him. So he never did it for me. And the Mets were more of a hate the logo, but the specific players, it was never really a hatred for me. So David Wright, I guess, just because he was the most prominent one, is the one that bothered me the most. But I don't know. I have more Marlins, like Dan Uggla bothers me more than anyone who ever played for the Mets, really. So it's a weird dynamic.
It is weird. Yeah. The Mets just haven't had a lot of demonstrative players. Like you said, I mean,
Right.
You point to David Wright because he's the best player, but how could you really hate David Wright? I mean, he's like the most wholesome man in America. So, it's hard to hate on David Wright, but hopefully if the Mets continue to play the way they have this year, there will be some players like maybe Pete Alonso or others.
No, I love Pete. I'll tell you, Brandon Nimmo, though, drives me insane.
There
drives
you go.
Me crazy. The way he sprints to first base, the way he sprints around the bases when he goes yard, it drives me nuts. Jog, dude. We get it. You hit it out. Jog.
See, we found someone. Brandon Nimmo.
He'll get there.
I can't wait till Aaron Nola, once again, walks in to lead off a game on Friday night, and I get to watch him sprint to first. It's going to be fantastic. We're going to talk about the pitching matchups in just a minute, but first, I want to tell you about Bet Online, which is your number one source for all of your betting stats and sports info. Find out the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of the Major League Baseball season. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your upcoming sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Before we talk about the pitching matchups, I did kind of allude to it. I am curious what you've seen from former Met Zack Wheeler early on this season. Are you concerned about those struggles, or you think this is something that he's going to figure out pretty soon?
Yeah, I'm not remotely concerned because there's a couple of clear-cut reasons why he would be struggling. Like if this was everything went normal this offseason, he comes in perfectly healthy and he just struggles out of nowhere, I'd be worried. When he had the workload that he had last year, then you have an already shortened spring training, shortened even more by a little bit of a shoulder issue, and then flu-like symptoms that cut down a couple bullpens he was supposed to throw. He got less time than the rest of the pitchers outside of Ranger Suarez, who had issues with that visa deal that was going on for Latin American players. He got less time than the majority of pitchers in the Phillies rotation and bullpen combined. So I'm not too worried. I think it'll settle out. And I also think it'll take him some time to get stretched back out into shape because he's still working back from that heavy innings workload he had last year, basically carrying this team on the mound to close to a playoff berth, as close as we've gotten in the past decade, at least. So I'm not too worried about him. I know that he's going to be fine because the talent level is going to be there. It just might take him a little bit longer to get stretched out.
And you also mentioned Suarez in that with the visa issues. Similar, I believe he's had kind of a slow start as well. You think that's along those same lines, just not the typical offseason heading into the year, and that once he gets a little more stretched out, a little more into midseason form, he's going to be back to the guy he was last season?
I'm a little more worried about him because Wheeler, we've seen him do it over the course of a couple seasons. Like Wheeler is the veteran pitcher that you know is basically in his prime and is going to give you those great starts at some point this year. Now, Ranger Suarez is a guy who had a breakout year last year, and now he's on everybody's radar. And he's also got the pressure of being that guy. Not that he's higher in the Phillies rotation, but now he's got the pressure of having a 1.36 ERA season behind him. And how does he follow that up? And it's impossible to repeat that. So I'm worried about a young pitcher with heavy expectations in a city like Philadelphia. How does that affect his next year? And I'm less confident that he's going to figure it out and be even close to the pitcher he was last year than I am sure that Zack Wheeler is going to bounce back. So a little bit worried about Ranger, but he did have that shortened offseason. He's going to get better than what he's been in his first couple starts. I just don't know how close he'll be to the pitcher he was last year.
Yeah, no, it's a tall task to try to match that type of a season. And I look at this rotation. We're going to talk now about all the pitching matchups. Kyle Gibson and Zach Eflin will start the second and third games of this series. And I think those guys are the type of veteran starters that you sort of know what you're going to get. I feel like the ERA this season will be anywhere between like 3.2 and 4.6, somewhere in there, but more times than not, they're professional starters that are going to be, getting the job done as middle of the rotation guys. You need Wheeler and Suarez to maybe hit a little bit of a higher ceiling. But really, I think the X factor for this Phillies rotation is the guy that we've seen atop this rotation for years, who's going to be starting game one, Aaron Nola. 3.74 ERA in the season up to this point. He's going to be going up against Tylor Megill, who has a 2.35 ERA. Nola was knocked out of the fourth inning in his last start against the Mets, gave up 3 runs. Is it still in there for him to be the ace of this staff and lead it, especially with Zack Wheeler maybe needing a little bit of time to get back into that type of ace form?
Oh, absolutely, it's still in there. He just went, 7 innings, 1 hit against the Brewers with 9 Ks. He looked great. Now, that was the Angel Hernandez game, so the zone was a little bit bigger there. But he has it in him. The issue with Nola is not the ability, because you think about it, even last year, in one of his worst years as a professional, you saw what he did against the Mets up there at your guys' place, tying Tom Seaver's record for most consecutive strikeouts. He's got the ceiling. The issue is the consistency is not there. For every game he has like that, he's got 3 games where you need him to either stop a slide in a series or win you a series in a getaway game, and he just falls apart. So it's, can he repeatedly do that? Or not even, he doesn't have to repeatedly strike out 9 guys and 1 hit a team, but can he give you quality start after quality start after quality start and let this offense do what they're meant to do, which is give you 5-6 runs and get out of there with a victory? I think he's going to end up having a very solid year because, frankly, he's too talented not to. The past 2 years, he's kind of collapsed. So he's due for a year where he's closer to 2018 than further away from it. But with the consistency issues, I just don't know how high that ceiling is going to be when everything's said and done. He's going to have moments where he looks like a Cy Young candidate. He has that ability in him. But will it be once a month? Will it be once every 3 months? That's up to him and how much focus he's going to put on his outings this year.
Am I going too far to say that Aaron Nola could really kind of make or break this season for the Phillies? Because I just think if you get a great version of Aaron Nola and you also are getting the contributions we already talked about, the steady contributions from Eflin and Gibson, and if Zack Wheeler can get back into shape, then Aaron Nola really transforms this team to actually have that 1-2 punch atop the rotation that could compete with a team like the Mets.
Yeah, you're not going too far because the average team, we're talking about the average team, not the Mets, because I know what your guys' pitching rotation is. It's incredible. But the average team, you can get away with 2 or 3 of those guys at the back of the rotation that just give you solid 4 or 5 innings every 5 days. But you need guys at the top that are going to be consistently great if you want to be a playoff team. You need that ace. And if Zack Wheeler is going to have a rough start, it's on Aaron Nola to be that guy. So, yeah, he's not going to be the worst pitcher on the staff, I don't think. I think he's going to be top 2 or 3 when the metrics are said and done, but he needs to be like excelling when it comes to his numbers. If this Phillies team is going to make the playoffs, they need him to be not necessarily the ace, because I think Wheeler can still be that guy, but he can't just be good. He needs to be great for them to get where they need to go. And that's why I think it is fair to say this season largely hinges on him not just being acceptable, being great, being close to his 2018 self for them to win the 88 to 90 games. I think they're going to need to get in the dance.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what Nola does. He's one of those pitchers that I'm excited to watch when I'm at the game on Friday. I'll tell you that. He'll be going against Tylor Megill, as I said. Megill last time out against the Phillies, 5 1/3 scoreless, 5 strikeouts. He looks like a budding star for the Mets, so that'll be a good pitching matchup.
Be honest now. DeGrom's not actually hurt. He's just wearing a jersey that says Megill on the back, right? He goes out of nowhere the second DeGrom gets hurt, and it's just
and that comparison. So I don't know if you know this. Megill debuted at the exact age as Jacob DeGrom to the day. They were like 20, whatever it was, 26 and 232 days or whatever it was. So there's been that comp, and then he also jumped in with injuries, had a really good first 7 starts. So that's been a weird comp that has been out there.
Steve Cohen's cloning these guys. I know he's doing it. He's got the money.
That could be it. They did the 3D printed DeGrom's elbow, and they had a surgery this offseason to help Megill out. Game 2, Gibson versus Taiwan Walker. Walker last time out got hurt against the Phillies, struck out 4 Phillies in 2 scoreless innings before he exited. Gibson has yet to face the Mets this season, a 3.47 ERA. To me, that's a game where really that could turn the tides. If the Phillies were to get game 1, or even not, they might need that second game, because game 3, you got Scherzer versus Eflin, and I feel like that's the one in this series where there's one clear, huge edge in a pitching matchup.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Taiwan Walker, if there is kind of a susceptible arm to get right now in this Mets rotation with DeGrom out, that's probably the guy you want to go after. It certainly is in this series with how the pitching matchups stack up. So, yeah, you look at that, and every series you go into, you pick out the guy out of the 3 that you're seeing or 4 that you're seeing. It's like, okay, we need this one. And this one is Taiwan Walker. Not that he's a bad arm by any stretch of the imagination. He's part of a great rotation, and he's going to be, I think you'll agree, a good part of that back end of rotation. Like if he has an average season at all, he's going to be a great help to you guys being the best rotation in baseball, or one of the best. But just because of circumstance, he's a guy that you look at like, okay, we got to go get him because Scherzer's going to be tough, and we couldn't touch Megill last time we saw him. So that's definitely the game I've got circled out of these 3 where the pitching matchup may most benefit the Phillies.
I think so too, and I think if you're the Mets, if you get to Sunday with an opportunity for Max Scherzer to win you a series, that's why it's so great to have him, because this is why the Mets have been winning series after series, because you have that pitching where a Bassett can go out of Carrasco, a Scherzer, and I feel pretty good about the Mets' chances. Scherzer versus Eflin, although Eflin has been good this year, 3.20 ERA. Has not faced the Mets, but he has been pretty solid for you guys.
Yeah, and he has been really accurate. There was a stat that just came out. He has one of the longest starts over a certain number of innings. I think it's 6 innings with 2 walks or less. Like there's only 3 other pitchers that have equaled. It's 28 starts now for him in the modern era, which is incredible. He's quietly very accurate, and he's very consistent. He doesn't really have the excitement factor that a DeGrom, a Scherzer, a Nola, a Wheeler have to be a top-end guy, but he just gets it done day in and day out. So maybe he could steal one, and I guess we're due against Scherzer eventually, right? He shut us down forever when he was in Washington. He shut us down the first time we saw him with you guys. So eventually we're going to run into one, right?
You hope so if you're a Phillies fan. But as a Mets fan who's watched him the last 2 times out, I'll just say simply good luck.
Unbelievable, man. He's unbelievable.
He is. It's crazy to watch. So it's been great to talk Mets Phillies with you. This is a rivalry that I think is always maybe my favorite in the NL East, because these are just two franchises that are kind of similar. You know, they have their great highs and they certainly have their great lows. I think these fan bases, even though they hate each other, I think they're more alike than they would like to admit as well. So great talking to you, Connor. Why don't you let my listeners know where they can find your work?
Yeah, great talking to you too, Ryan. You can find me on Twitter at ConnorThomas975. You can find everything Locked On Phillies at LO_Phillies on Twitter. Find us on YouTube at Locked On Phillies. And you can hear me talking sports talk. If you're in the Philadelphia area, you find us on the app on 97.5 The Fanatic in the morning on the John Kincaid Show. And I do TV spots too, believe it or not. This ugly, and they put me on TV on NBC Sports Philadelphia.
And if you were listening today, you could have seen Connor's face on our YouTube channel at Locked On Mets. So you can follow us there. For all the Phillies listeners, you might want to find my work. I'm at Finkelstein Ryan on Twitter. You can find the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making this your first listen today. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB, hosted by Paul Francis Sullivan, but we call him Sully. He's got you covered with everything going on with Major League Baseball. You can follow Locked On MLB wherever you get podcasts.
Man, that was a fun crossover. Hopefully, the Phillies take care of business up there in New York, because Ryan's really feeling himself with the Mets, as well he should be. The Mets are off to a great start, but a big couple of games up there at Citi Field. And we'll see. I'll have your latest on how the Phillies do up there. Hopefully, they can keep the hot train that they're on rolling up there to New York City. Well, that was fun. Thank you for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. Make your second listen Locked On MLB. Paul Francis Sullivan, Sully. He's great. You want to check out what he does there. We had a crossover earlier this week. He's an encyclopedia of baseball knowledge. Go ahead and check out his stories of the past and his thoughts on the present of Major League Baseball. And definitely check out Locked On Mets with Ryan Finkelstein. It's awesome. It's a great show. He has great crossovers. He has great content. And even though we're kind of anti-Mets because we're Phillies fans, Ryan does a great job. So go ahead and give him some love as well. That's all I've got for you today. And I will talk to you about Mets-Phillies Game 1 tomorrow.